So before we get started today, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to shout out a really good friend of mine, Will Mitchell. Will, I just wanted to say I really appreciate your perspective on testing React components. It's heavily affected the way I test my components now, and I just wanted to say thank you. You're the best, and I really, really appreciate you.
How's it going? Young June here. If you are clicking this video or wanting to watch this video because you wanted to see my live code of my workshop at RailsConf, the war is over, Rails, webpacker, and JavaScript, some semblance of those three things, then you're in the right place. Technically, you're in the right place. The problem is that partway through my workshop, my talk, my computer decided to not continue recording. So technically, you're in the right place. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be live coding the first part of this. I'm going to break this talk or this workshop into like 3 or 4 different videos just because it's so long. And I want to make sure that, you know, especially for you who's following along, that you can take breaks. And I would probably encourage, if you're doing this, to like stop the video every 25 minutes and take like a 5-minute Pomodoro break. Go and like grab some coffee, call your mom, do something to just like get you away from continuing to code. But if you're here because you want to learn about webpacker and you want to build something, and you want to see how to use some of these technologies, you're technically in the right place. Today we're going to be building something in React. So if you don't know React or aren't familiar with React, this might be a little I wouldn't say difficult, just a little bit harder to follow than usual because there's a lot more moving pieces. And I would recommend you watch my intro to React video. I'll link that at the bottom in the comments or in the description section. That will be definitely beneficial for you before you even get started in doing this today. But before we get going, you're going to want to go ahead and clone down this repo on my GitHub. It'll also be linked in the description below. It'll be joshua.june/RailsConf webpacker. And if you're looking at this, there are some prerequisites in order for you to even run this app. You're going to need Ruby 2.2 and above, Rails 4.2 and above. This is using Rails 5.1, so that's going to make it even easier. Node 6 and Yarn 2.5.2 and above. Once you've done that, you're going to need to do a couple things. You need to run bundle install and yarn install. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So bundle install, that should be pretty quick, and for me, and yarn install. And once you've done that, you can run some tests and see if your tests are hooked up and working. If you get lost, I've broken this into 4 phases for us. So at any point in time, you can either just check out that branch, commit your code, check out the branch, and you'll have all the code needed, so that you can just like look at it. I don't want this code along to get in the way of you trying to learn what's going on here. It's just more of a tool for you to like kind of understand what's happening. So that is pretty much that. Looks like we're done installing. Why don't we go ahead and go in and let's take a look at what webpacker gives us. So right off the bat, there are a couple files you're going to notice that you may not be used to seeing. If you have started a regular Rails application, there's a babelrc, a package.json, there's a yarn lock. I'm going to go over these files in a bit here, but if we open up app, what you'll see here is you'll have most of what you're used to seeing, but this JavaScript file is something that's new. Typically, if you hop into the asset pipeline, you'll see that there is a JavaScript folder available for you. And this is typically where you might have traditionally written a lot of your JavaScript and kind of house your assets. But now, because we're using webpacker, most of what, if not all of what we're going to be doing today is just going to be strictly in here inside of the JavaScript portion, which I'm pretty excited about. The goal of today is, as we go through this, I want to write tests, and I want to make all of those tests pass before we even like look at the browser. So we're not even going to look at the browser today. We're just going to write tests, and in very much like a Rails way, make sure every test passes, and then check to see if everything's working. That's kind of what we're going to be doing today. There are a couple things in here. You have a components file. App is in there, has a test, it has an index.js. We have some packs in here. This is typically where the entry file of your JavaScript is going to be, because we are doing this with the React bundle, or the way you would do it with Webpacker. You just start it with React. They give us some freebie stuff already. So like this file, for instance, is right here. It's going to have some React stuff. What's really cool about this packs folder, if we head over there, is that any sort of like, let's say you aren't building a single page web application, you aren't using something like a React router or like an Angular router or Ember router, you're literally just using your Rails router. You can essentially load in those components how you'd like into this packs portion. So you'd make like an admin view component or a orders component, and you could essentially take the pack tag that you would see here and just store that into that particular view. So for us, because we're building a single page web application, if you head over to the layouts portion, the application.html.erb, you'll see that I've just thrown in here onto line 6 this pack tag. And what this is going to do, it's going to go find this inside of packs. It's going to grab all those components and essentially load those in. So you're going to want to keep what's inside of packs pretty minimal. So only the necessary code needed for that entry file. So for me, what I like to do is typically keep a separate folder of components, and then just have this be the single entry point for my JavaScript. And so when I mount my app component, everything else will just mount on top of app. So that's typically what you'll see here. One thing that I do want to point your attention to is the webpack config file. So here, there are 4 files that Webpacker gives us. This first one's going to be development. You're not really going to touch this. So in very much like Rails fashion, that conceptual compression that you might hear a lot of people talk about, this is ready to go. So in terms of a development standpoint, you're fine. Same with your production. You're not going to need to do much, which is really great. We have an environment section. This is where you're going to add like loaders. So if you're using anything like CoffeeScript, Sass, stuff like that, you can load those into here. What's nice is Webpacker comes pre-bundled with that. So if you do want to use CoffeeScript or you do want to use Sass, you can do that right off the bat. Some things I've seen people put in here are things like linters. So if you're going to be like using a linter, like for instance, we probably would need some semicolons here. You can definitely throw a linter into here. If you want to do any sort of like code splitting, let's say, I'm not an admin and I go to your web application and you're loading in admin code. I'm not an admin. Why am I paying for that? Like, you can split that code bundle, and you can load those in here, which is pretty helpful. And again, your test environment. So pretty simple. The one thing that you are going to want to look at is going to be this webpacker.yml, this YAML file. Traditionally, this is going to be a JSON object, and because we're in Rails, it's YAML. Some things to point your attention to: anything here that has this particular extension, JSX, JS, Sass, CSS, you won't actually have to put that file extension at the end of the file when you import it, which is nice. So Webpacker will handle that for us. Here's some dev server configuration stuff. Again, for the most part, very ready to go. This thing might be a thing you want to change. HMR means hot module reload. It's set to false right off the bat. You can set it to true. So when you write your files, the Webpack dev server will just automatically recompile for you. I'll show you a script on how to do that when we get into some other files. It's a lot easier, and you'll typically see this pattern done in other front-end JavaScript applications. You can change your port. I typically am just going to leave this alone. This is good to go. Cool, we're good with that. One thing I do want to show you is that when you do run rake assets precompile, Webpacker will hook into that and then produce a build file for every single entry point in your application, which is really great. So this will be handled for you. So you won't even have to like run a separate script to compile your assets. Webpacker will do that for you, which is awesome. Now let's get into some of the JavaScript files that you may not be used to. This is a Babel.rc file. Typically right off the bat, this is ready to go. I've added a couple things in here because I wanted I want to use some like ES6, ES7 syntax. And what Babel is doing is essentially taking any ES6 and above code and transpiling it into common JS, because a lot of the browsers out there aren't really ready to use ES6 just yet. Chrome is supporting it, but you have people like using IE6, Microsoft Edge and stuff like that, and so we need to transpile that code down to common JS. And so here on line 4 I'm using Babel Env, which is allowing us to use the most common or the most current version of JavaScript. Line 8 says that too as well. Here we're going to use the most current version of it. We're using a React thing, so we can compile that with React. Some plugins here. The other thing that I've added is this env environment, because we're going to be doing a lot of testing today. That code also needs to compile down to common JS, so we're doing that the same thing here. So that's what Babel's doing. Babel's going to run. It's going to transpile our JavaScript into common JS. One other thing that you're going to be needed to be aware of is this package.json thing. Now, can you imagine running any Rails application without this thing? That would be incredibly difficult if we didn't have Bundler, if we didn't have a gem file. And this is kind of the front end's version of that. npm is a thing that we need to be connected to, because that's going to give us all of our module dependencies. So if I want to pull in React, if I want to pull in a testing library or anything like that, this package.json is going to get us connected to npm. And we're going to need a thing to bundle those things up for us and install those things for us, and that's what Jest is going to do. Not Jest, excuse me, Yarn is going to do. So I've added a couple of things in here. I created 2 scripts for you. One of them is going to be the test script. So we're going to be using Jest to run our tests, so it's going to be our test runner. This is our start script to run our Webpack dev server. I kind of told you I'd show you how to make it hot module reload. All you have to do is add -- hot. And it'll do that for you, which is nice. But we're going to be really working off of that environment. We're going to drive our development test today, so I'm going to leave that off. I've added a Jest configuration portion to the package.json for us. So this first piece on line 23 is so that if Jest is pretty aggressive in how it runs our tests, and so it'll recursively look through our file structure until it finds something that with a test extension or at the end of it. And so what I've done is say, hey, just look into the components folder and run that test. What you'll typically see when you run line 24 without this configuration, you just run, excuse me, not 24, line 20. It'll actually try to run our test environment as a test, and it'll say it's a failing test. So went ahead and just said, just look in the components folder and run that test. Last thing I added is a setups file, because React and JavaScript are constantly changing. Our testing library and the thing that allows us to mount our components onto a virtual DOM right now aren't really talking, so we have to use an adapter. So I created an adapter for us. So if we head over to this file structure and we go to the test config and open this up, Enzyme is going to go ahead and run that for us. So when you ran yarn install, it basically went ahead and installed all the dependencies needed and created this folder called a node modules folder, and it's going to have every dependency in our front-end application installed for us right here. So that is that. Cool. Why don't we go ahead and get started and start writing some code. So the first thing that we probably need to do, I'm going to put out of this, is we need to deal with this thing. We're not going to be using this. We're going to be using our own app, and what we're going to be building today is a thing called IdeaBox. That's what we like to call it at the Turing School. And essentially what it is, it's a CRUD app for the most part. And what we're going to be doing is you're going to be adding ideas into a form, and then you're going to see those ideas dynamically populate at the bottom of our single page web application. It's going to look a little like this. I'll show you a little GIF of it right here. That's essentially what it's going to be doing. So what we need to do is we need to make an entry file for that. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. So I'm going to say I need to touch a new file inside of app, JavaScript packs, and we're going to call it ideabox.js. So that should be in there now. We're not going to need any of this other stuff. Like we have Hello React in there, this application stuff. We're not going to need that, but before we even extract or remove that, we need to make another file. And typically what you'll see inside of a lot of the JavaScript applications is you'll have an index.js, and what the index.js is going to do is it's just going to like that's kind of the mounting point and entry point for all of our stuff. So what I'd love to do is extract what I'd be putting into packs into that file so that when I look at packs, it's very small. So I'm going to touch a new file. I'm just going to call it index.js. So now that's there. So once this is done refreshing, what we can do is we'll just go ahead and, for the most part, grab what's in here. Let's yank that. And let's just go to the index and we'll paste that in there. One thing I do want to say is that we're not going to need any of this, so we can remove that. We're going to need our app. So I'm going to import app from components. Actually, it's just /components. Components, and it'll be app. Cool. I'm not using this right now. I am using this, and I'm going to get rid of this whole line. And what I am going to say is I'd like for you to render app. So what React is doing here, mainly React DOM, is it's saying, hey, grab that React component you want. I'm going to make a div, and I'm going to put this component onto that particular div that you want to use. So that's all this is doing for us. What we need to do now is we need to go to IdeaBox, and what we need to do is import that file. So // we'll say index.js. That's all we need to do. I'm going to quit that, and here we can write that file. The next thing we need to do now is we need to remove some of these pack files because we aren't going to be using them anymore. So JavaScript packs application.js, let's remove that. And instead of the application, we'll also do hello React. Oops. We have to redo that one because I messed it up. Cool. Awesome. That looks good to me. Those should be gone now. We have to change one more thing as well, is when we go to the application.html.erb, this is still loading in the hello React portion, and we don't want that. We want IdeaBox in here. IdeaBox. Cool. Sweet. For the most part, our app is set up and ready to go. Let's see what it looks like to run some tests here. So I'm going to open up a new shell. I'm going to go ahead and write. The script we're going to be needing today is a thing called yarn test. That's going to run our tests. And what's cool is that -- watch flag that you saw is essentially going to wait for us to write a new file. And then once we write a new file, it'll rerun all the tests, which is really great for us because I don't have to like rerun it every single time. We'll just go ahead and do that. So here it looks like it says render shallow rendering works only with custom components, but the provided element was an object. What does that mean? That basically means that there's no code, nothing is being exported out of our app. So if we hop over here and look at app, there's nothing. There's literally nothing. And let's take a look at our app test then. And it looks like it needs some stuff. So what I'm going to do is there are a couple of components that we're going to be using today. One of them is going to be something called a stateful component. And app is going to be stateful. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start with doing that. So the first thing we need to do is import React, but not just React, more importantly, the component part of React from React here. Once we've done that, we can start making our class. So I'm going to say class app, and it's going to extend, which is kind of like React's or JavaScript's way of inheriting. We'll say extends the component. That's all I need for now. And we need to export this. Export default app. Let's just see if we can get this first test to pass. I'm expecting it now to say that there's no render function. Cool. Render is not a function. Every React component needs a stateful component needs a render function. So let's go ahead and render that. So we'll just say render. And that. Cool. And now it's saying that there is no function called mi at RailsConf. So let's go ahead. So you can actually see that right here. Mi at RailsConf is not a function. So let's go ahead and add that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say mi at RailsConf. Look at that. Vim already knows. Thank you. Now it's going to say I'm returning undefined and not true. And cool, right there. So let's return true. Okay, and that should pass. Now, first of all, if you're watching this and you're a Rails developer and you felt the pain of JavaScript, I'm hoping right now you're feeling really good about this, because we literally just wrote a test and had it pass, and look what we have. Like, this is crazy. This looks very much like a, that looks very much like a unit test, because it is. And this looks very much just like a class, because it is. So, I'm pretty stoked on that. So this is just kind of a gimme test. Let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be building today. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to write a new test. And what I think should happen is app is going to be kind of our larger stateful component. It's going to house all of our ideas. So it's probably going to need a way to house that in state. So when I say state, state's going to house typically anything that is really important to our app, whether that be just the view layer, so things that should or shouldn't render, or because we don't have any external like model or external like state management tool other than React, like Redux, we're just going to put our ideas or our business logic into this portion of our React app. So I'm going to say app should have a state of ideas, and its value should be an empty array. Cool. So that's what I think it should do. I'm going to start writing this test. So I'm going to say const rendered app. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shallow mount this. Shallow is a thing that comes to us from Enzyme. Enzyme is a way for us to mount our React components onto a JS instance of the DOM. When I say JS, it's because it's not a real DOM. It's just like something that is created under the hood with, I believe it's called JS DOM, and it's a thing that makes a fake instance of the DOM for us so we can mount our components and test them. So shallow is what we're going to be using a lot of today. So we're going to render that. I'm going to say const expected state. And that should be an empty array. And my actual, so const actual state, should be the rendered app dot state. And in Enzyme, this comes from Enzyme, this is a function, and I can pass through what state I want, and I'm going to say ideas. That's our actual state. I expect my actual state to equal my expected state. Cool. So if we're looking at this, I think it's going to fail on line 11. That's where it should fail. Sure enough, it fails on line 11. It says I can't read ideas of null. That's because we actually haven't added state. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. So the way we add state is because we are extending from a component that gives us the ability to manage state inside of a React app. So here I'm going to say constructor, constructor, which is the equivalent of Ruby's definitionalize. This is the first function that fires to create some of those attributes for us. I'm going to super to the component class so I can use the ability to manage state. I'm going to say this.state, which is going to be an object. What we're saying is all of my state's going to live here. And now that's living there, I can say ideas, and I'm just going to give it an empty string because I don't know. It's just saying it got null, and let's just see what it gives us now. Cool, I got an empty string and not an array. Kind of what we were expecting, right? It needed an array, and now we're giving it an empty string. Let's just go ahead and now give it that array. And it passes. Great. That's awesome. What I was hoping to see, if I look, I went from red to green. Let's see if we can refactor anything. I don't see anything we can refactor in our class itself. And I don't see anything we can refactor in our tests so far because we only have one test. But let's add another one and see where that goes. Cool. So the next thing we should do is probably have a function that adds an idea to our state. What good is an app that houses ideas if you can't even add anything to those ideas, right? So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say when add idea is invoked, it should add the desired idea to our state. That's what I would hope it would do. Now, because I don't want you to see me type this out painfully, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of copy pasta some of this stuff from my notes. Also, I just hurt my finger riding my electric skateboard. So if you're thinking about riding an electric skateboard, be mindful of wet spots on the trail, because it's not fun when you fall. Cool. Let's do that. Great. This looks all good. So this is my expectation. I'm going to call this expected state instead of expectation, because I feel like that's a lot better. So let's do that. So 1, 2, cool. Expected state. Great. Let's reformat some of this stuff. Ooh. Cool. Cool. So that looks good to me. What we are going to need too is we're going to need our const rendered app. And we'll say that equals a shallow mounted app. Great. So let's look at what we're doing here. I am saying I would like a rendered app. This is my expectation, not necessarily my expected state. And what I'm saying here is that I want an object containing an idea of any number. And the reason why I'm saying any number here is because I'm going to be using date.now as an ID for us. And because I can't necessarily test that piece, I'm just going to say any number that comes through should be fine as my ID. I'm calling the function here. I'm saying rendered app.instance add idea. So I'm taking an object, I'm passing in a title and a body into our app. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write my expectation, and I'm going to say const actual state is going to equal that rendered app.state of ideas. And I'm going to expect that the actual state to equal our expected state. Now, I'm expecting this to fail, obviously, because we don't have this function. So if I write this file, I should see that instance is add idea is not a function unless we have some sort of syntax error, which I would not be surprised by. Cool. Rendered app is not defined. Cool. We got a syntax error, so let's call that render app. Spelling's hard. Good thing we have tests. Great. It says rendered app.instance add idea is not a function. Cool. Let's make it a function. So I'm going to say here add idea. I write that. Great. Now it's saying my state hasn't changed. I've just received the same state. So now we actually have to put some logic into this test. So here I'm probably going to think, let's write some pseudocode. We should take the idea parameter into our function, add that idea to the state, ideas state. Once that is done, we'll set our state. Seems legit. So probably the first thing I'm going to do is say idea in here, because I'm passing through an idea, so I can get rid of that. I need to grab that idea, put it in state. I guess before that, we should probably say add ID to the idea object. Cool. So let's do that too. So I'm going to say idea.id is equal to date.now. Great. Let's go ahead and push this into the state array. So I'm going to say, let's get rid of this too. I'm going to say, why though? Const ideas equals this dot state dot ideas. I'm going to say ideas dot push my idea, and then now we need to set this in state. So I've done that, pushed it into our array. Let's set that in state. So this dot set state ideas is equal to ideas. Cool, it passes. So I went from red to green. Let's see if we can refactor. So first of all, I don't really like this implementation. I don't like that we are changing our parameter instead of like returning something new. And I don't really like push, because push essentially just returns us the length. So I think something we can do is we can use a lot of like the new ES6 stuff to help us out here. So one of the things we can do is we can use, first of all, the spread operator. So instead of using push, I'd rather do something along the lines of spreading that across. So instead of saying this.state.ideas, I can say, give me an array, take everything in the state of ideas, everything in that array, just spread that across into this new array. And then let's go ahead and tack on everything else inside of idea. So like our new idea. So what I'm probably going to do is first, let's give it an ID, right? So let's do that. And then after that, let's say that you are date.now. And let's take whatever is inside idea and just throw those key value pairs into this object. So I'm going to say idea. So now our ideas look like that. So let's see if this passes. Great. It still passes. And some of you might be like, well, I don't really like the fact that you're calling it ideas. Yeah, that's true. But the reason why I did that is because I'd much rather just say this. Take the value of ideas and the key of ideas, right? Take and just set that in here. So basically take this variable, set that variable as a key, and its value as the value assigned to that key here. I can remove this now, by the way. And let's see if this works. And it does. Great. So we have went from red to green to refactor. If you aren't stoked on this right now, I don't know why. I feel like if you're coming from a Rails background and testing JavaScript has been really frustrating, like this should be so exciting for you, because all of a sudden our environment is accommodating to JavaScript, kind of like we'd hope it would be. So we have made a function that adds an idea. Let's see if we can make a function that will remove an idea. That would be really, really great. So I'm going to say here, when remove idea is invoked, it should remove the desired idea from our state. Great. Seems like a legit test. Now I know I've written this. The one thing we did not do, I'm going to skip this real fast. Hold my horses here. We did not refactor our tests. As I'm looking at this, go in here and quit this. We did not refactor our tests. Like we're constantly, I feel like, talking to this rendered app thing. And it would make more sense if we kind of streamlined that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it before each block. I'm going to use the keyword let here, and I'm going to say rendered app. I'm going to use let because it's going to be redefined every time. I'm going to say before each test runs, I'd like for you to do something for me. And so we're going to put a callback in here. And technically, because it's a one line, I don't even need these curly braces. So I'm going to take the curly braces out. I'm going to do this in one line. I'm going to say rendered app is equal to a shallow mounted app. Great. So that looks good to me. Technically, we can just do that. Let's run it and let's see what happens. Rendered app is not defined. So let's go ahead and, where did it say that first of all? Render app. So I didn't call it rendered app. Man. How about that? Let's see. Great. Let's see if we can get rid of this and this. Let's see if that still passes. Cool. Actual state, render app. Again, rendered app. Why though? Cool. Great. That works. We've refactored our test now. So let's unskip this because we can now write our test. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grab our stuff here because I don't want to bore you with me typing this out. So let's do that. So again, const expectation. What I'm going to say here again is not expectation but expected state, because I feel like that's a little more descriptive. We have our current state. What we need to do now is we need to set our state. So I'm going to say rendered app dot set state, and I'm going to set the state of ideas to our current state. Current state. Cool. Now that we've done that, we set our state. The next thing we need to do is we need to call this function. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say render, actually you can start on that same line, rendered app.instance, and I'm going to say dot remove idea is what we called it. I'm going to remove the second one because that's what we want removed from our expected state. Remove number 2, and I'm going to say const actual state is going to be equal to rendered app dot state ideas. I'm going to grab that, and I'm now going to make my expectation, and I would expect that the actual state should be equal to our expected state. Cool. I expect it to fail on line 43. I'd hope you expect it to fail on line 43. And it does. We don't have remove idea, so let's make it. So let's go ahead and go into app.app/index.js. Cool. So now I'm going to say remove idea. Why though? Cool. Let's see if that works. Great. It actually didn't remove our idea, so now we're at the place where we need to now start thinking about how we're going to do this. So I'm thinking that we need to take in the ID. So let's write some pseudocode. Take in ID param, filter through state array, remove ID that equals ID passed in, set state with new ideas array. So let's take in that param. So here I'm going to say ID. So we've done that. We need to filter through that state array. So I'm going to say const ideas is going to equal this dot state dot ideas dot filter. Filter takes in a callback, and I'm going to say the idea in here. Cool. So every idea that is equal to, not equal to this ID are the ideas that I want. So I'm going to say here ideas.id not equal to the ID passed in. So essentially what I'm saying is just give me everything but that particular ID or that idea. And then now I can set state. So I'll say this dot set state, say ideas. Cool. Ideas is not defined. So let's see. Oh, typo on line 12. This is why you read the errors. And this is why it's always great to have tests, because in this particular case, I wouldn't have found out until I reloaded the page. But as you know, tests are better. And sure enough, our tests pass. Great. So we are done with our unit tests, which I'm really excited about. So let's go back to the app/app tests, and let's go ahead and start a new describe block, and let's describe some app UI tests, because now we have all the unit functionality, but we don't actually see or know what's being rendered onto the DOM right now. So a couple of things that need to be rendered: a form, And we're also going to need a container for our cards, or a thing that's going to take the ideas array, map over them, and then return all the cards we'd like to see on the DOM. So let's go ahead and start that. So probably the first thing I'm going to say is app should render an idea or a form component. Now, there are a couple ways to do this. Some people like to use a thing called snapshot. I would say that's not good for TDD because I'm trying to press TDD. This is probably the better way. So first thing I'm going to say is I want const expected component length. That's going to equal 1. So I'm expecting that component length. Component, spelled it wrong. Component length. Cool. That's that. Spelling's really hard for me, so I have to like say it over and over really slow. So we have our expected component length. What I would like to do is find that. So I'm going to say const actual component length is equal to rendered app dot find. Find is the thing that is given to us by Enzyme. It's going to look through that render portion and find a component or a HTML element that we're looking for, or a JSX element, excuse me. And what I'm looking for is a component called form. And now I'm going to expect that our actual component length to equal our expected component length. Now, this is going to return the actual component, so what I want here is actually the length. So that's what we do need to add. So the actual component length should equal the expected component length. That there should be one of them in there. I feel like it's going to fail on line 53, this piece right here, because it's not defined. I would expect that. Cool, form is not defined. So it's looking for a thing, it's like, that's not a thing. So let's go ahead and import that into our test. So I'm going to import form from. Now, if you guess, we don't have this, but let's pretend like we do. It's going to say that it doesn't find that thing. Great. So form cannot find that module. So what do we need to do? Let's go ahead and make that. So I'm going to make a directory inside of app, JavaScript components, and inside here I'm going to say form. Great. Now I'm going to touch a new file inside there. So touch inside of form, we'll say index.js. Great. So that technically should make the error change, and it does. And now it's saying, hey, you're giving me null. Null's being returned to us. So every component needs to return a JSX element. So because I don't really know what form is going to be yet, I'm going to go ahead and just like add some stuff to that form. So when we go into form, I'm going to import React, just React from React. And I'm going to return something called a pure stateless functional component. It's just fancy schmancy words for a function. So I'm going to return the form, and it's going to be a function, and I'm going to say cool, some JSX in here. I'm going to say form, and I'm going to export default form. See if that passes. Cool. It doesn't pass. Why would it not pass? Everything is there, but it looks like our test moved down from line 54 to 56, and what it's looking for is inside of our actual component of app. So app is not rendering this thing, which makes sense because we haven't changed anything inside app yet. So first things first, let's import our form from form, and let's go down here and let's just return our form. So I'm going to say here, let's return this. That makes sense. Great, it passes. Cool. So technically we have our form on there. We're going to test form out, and as form begins to grow, we'll use that. But let's go back into app tests and let's see what else we need to add. we should have another thing in there. So app should render a card container. So something that is going to take our state of app and load all that good stuff. A lot of what we're going to be doing is going to look a lot like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to paste it down here. Why would you do that? Cool. Instead of finding our form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say card container. And again, when we write this, I would expect it to say that card container is not there. And sure enough, card container is not defined. So what do? We'll go ahead and add that. So we'll import card container from card container. Great. Card container cannot find it, so let's make it. So instead of making form, we'll make card container. And we'll also, instead of making that index in form, we'll make it in card container. Great. Let's see what the error says now. You're giving me null, so what do we need to do? We need to go back into card container. And let's go ahead and import React from React. And let's do the same thing. We'll say const card container equals a function that returns this JSX. And we'll say here h1 card container. And we'll export default the card container. Cool. So it's failing, and it's failing on line 65. We moved from 63 to 65, which is what we'd expect. And it looks like form or app is not rendering that correctly. So let's go back into the app index. So you might be thinking it might make sense to just throw the card container here. Well, first of all, we don't have that imported, so let's import that. Import card container from card container. And the short is you can't do that. It's going to say you adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So just like any function in JavaScript, you can only return a single thing. So what we want to do is we're going to want to split this down just like that. And what we want to do is wrap this in an enclosing thing. So I'll probably throw it in a section. Let's do that. My computer's being slow. Paste that in there. Why though? Why would you do that? Actually, let's do that. Formatting. So rough. Cool. That looks good to me. Let's move this over. We should be good now. We are missing some parens, so let's throw that in there. Great. Let's see. Card container from index.js. So that is failing on our tests on line. No, that's actually not in our test. That's in here. Oh, that's why. Because I imported it wrong. How about that? Great, it passes. Cool. Let's take a look at our test file just to make sure everything's good. Index.js. Actually, let's go to the test. And let's just take a look to make sure everything is good in this department. Looks fine to me. Our tests look good. So I'm going to stop the first section of our video here because I feel like we've been going for a while now. So I hope this shows you how easy it is to get up and running with React and test. I think the best way to learn something is to test it. And I would hope that this video kind of showcases to you like how streamlined and good that can actually be, that process can be. I will have the next video out for us testing form and card container soon, but I hope this was extremely helpful for you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. I'm Young June, and I'll see you next time.